arrow penetration testing based on differences in arrow weight. I think we've all seen the videos. I've had COVID for the last 5 or 6 days, and so I've been basically researching nothing but this. What I've discovered is it seems like a lot of people use different test mediums, anything from ballistics gel to cardboard to just a foam target. And I'm not a scientist, but the general consensus, I think, is that mediums that squeeze down on the arrows maybe aren't the best for replicating what happens when an arrow goes through an animal. I don't know. It seems to me like in every target I use, the heavier arrows penetrate a little bit better. I've got a foam target, I've got a couple 3D targets, and I've got a bag target, and that's the case in every one of those. So I don't know what people are doing differently that gets them different results, but I'm gonna try to see if I can make the absolute best test possible. So what I've got, 3 arrows, 2 of which are the exact same shaft, exact same length, different weights. It's got different inserts. As you can see there, one's a 100 grain insert, one's just your standard, whatever, 17 grain or 11, whatever they are. Of course, there's different FOC with that. The lightest arrow, let's see, that weighs 425, and FOC is 13.2. The next arrow up, exact same shaft, exact same length, brass insert. That one weighs 505. FOC was 17. And they're all, of course, shooting the same broadheads. They're Muzzy Trocar, brand new broadheads. The third arrow is a little more of an experiment. I didn't have a real good way of increasing weight without drastically changing the FOC. So I wrapped tape around the shaft. I don't know if these are going to go all the way through or if they're going to stop halfway through my target. So this may be a factor in penetration, but I'm going to try it. This particular arrow is 545 grains in weight, and FOC is actually identical to the lightest arrow at 13.2. So hopefully they stop somewhere in the target and that tape doesn't affect the penetration. Regardless, I'm going to give it a try. So the target. This is what I've got made up. So we're going to start at the front end, and I have a piece of tanned, I think it's a mule deer actually, hide that, as you can see, has been soaking in water. It will continue to soak. It's pretty supple, but I'm going to soak it for another hour or so. That's going to sit across the front of my box. That'll just be draped across the front. Immediately inside that is this doubled up foam insulation. I think that makes a pretty good representation of kind of the grabby fat layer that does have a little more grip to it, but it's not super dense foam. Behind that, I think it's 3/8 plywood. It might be a hair thicker, I don't know. But regardless, they're all going through the same length. I even went through to find, there's a knot there, but in my target area, all the pieces of plywood are clear, there's no knots. Behind that is cardboard, an airspace, cardboard, an airspace, cardboard, and then a used chemical jug filled to the line full of water. Now I like that over a milk jug because it's got flat sides. There's no, they're just plain sided, so there's nothing to really throw off any kind of result, I don't think. Another piece of cardboard, another airspace, another cardboard, another piece of the same plywood. As you can see, it's good and clear. Another piece of foam, and the backside. I didn't put another piece of hide because at that point, I think it's representative enough. And then what I'm going to do with this whole thing is, before I shoot it, I'm going to kind of soak the whole thing in water. Now it's not going to sit in water, but I just want everything to be a little bit wet. I think that's, to me, that seems like it could be a factor in how the arrows are gripped on the way through. Inside an animal, almost everything is wet, aside from the fat layer, which this foam is not going to absorb water, so it will be dry inside. Of course, the plywood, that's not going to soak up water either. But I think I think this is going to be a good test medium. I'm shooting a pretty run-of-the-mill Hoyt. The lightest arrow is probably going to be going about 275 feet per second. I don't know what the heavier ones are going to... It doesn't really matter. I mean, if you have the same bow, same difference in weight, it's going to make about the same, you know, difference in speed. Yeah, I don't know. So I'm going to give this a shot, and let's just see what happens. Of course, I have new jugs, replacement jugs, as you can see here. I may end up duct taping holes and trying again, you know, just to replicate results, but this looks like a pretty fair test to me, so we'll see. Okay, I think we're all ready. Like I said, I wet everything down. I didn't soak it, but just good and damp. I think like a whitetail's body would be. And hopefully this shows something. This is going to be the heavy arrow first. Okay, that was the heaviest taped up arrow. I actually damaged the... Alright, didn't go through. I damaged the middleweight arrow when I was sighting in for the different weights. It nicked a fletching and also damaged the broadhead. I am not impressed with those Muzzy Trocar broadheads at all. But it's what I've got. I don't use them for deer, it's just my testing material. So, arrow went through the hide, through the cardboard, through the jug, and looks like it's stuck into the back cardboard. Yeah, the tip just barely poked through. You can see the spot on the foam. I mean, just barely. I can feel a raised hump there, but I can't actually feel the metal. So that's the 545 grain, I think that's what it was, arrow. 13.2%. Okay, set back up, everything's wetted down again. Lightweight arrow, this one's 425. And it's important to note that the FOC of these two arrows, the lightest and the heaviest, are identical. Okay, 425. Okay, so we have a little bit of a result. It actually missed the first plywood. I completely missed. I tried to put a narrow piece because it's more like a rib, I thought. It missed it, and it still penetrated less than the heavyweight arrow. It's just the tip is inserted into the back plywood. So we're gonna reset and do one more time, but right there, that says something. Third time's the charm for the lightweight arrow. Let's see if I can hit the plywood this time. Maybe I should have used a bigger piece. Okay, that shot looked good. Right in the middle. So, through the plywood, through the jug, out the back, and not in the back plywood. It just poked into the last piece of cardboard. So, I've got that middle arrow. It's going to be my last test. I'm leaving that arrow in because it's plugging the hole in my jug. The water level's high enough, it should be able to shoot right through. With the middleweight arrow, has a damaged fletching, but I'm going to replace the broadhead with a sharp one, and hopefully I can still hit the middle with the torn fletching. So this is a 505 grain higher FOC arrow. Okay, so middleweight arrow, higher FOC. You can see it went another 2 inches, maybe 2¼ inches. Here's my damaged vein. Through the plywood, through the jug, and poking out the back of the plywood. Straight down from my finger here. Right there. Just barely. About like the heaviest arrow, really. I can feel it, but the tip's not through. And you can see on this side, it's very much stuck in. I think that's pretty definitive, and right there you can see the difference in those 2 arrows. So that's higher FOC and a little more weight, only 75 grains more. I don't know which variable is more important, but the gist of it is both of my arrows over 500 grains buried deep into this back piece of plywood. The arrow under never made it that far. Even in the target where I missed the front plywood, it's still only barely stuck back there. Okay, I'm gonna do this one more time. I've replaced the front plywood. It's a wider version, so I might be able to hit it every time. The jug, of course, is empty now. The water's all drained out. Everything else is the same. Anyway, I'm gonna try to shoot all 3 arrows, one after the other, and hopefully they hit, about the same spot. Problem is, one arrow's damaged, and the arrow with the tape on the back doesn't fly very well at all, but still seems to penetrate deeper than any of the others. But we'll see. So here it goes. right, that was real time from the lightest arrow to the heaviest. And guess what? Lightest, 425, 505 with the broken vane, 545 with a load of tape back here. So that can't help anything. 13.2 FOC, 13.2 FOC, 17 and change. So I don't know how you can argue with that. The lightest arrow, same as before, exact same, which really replicates or says something to the replication of my testing. The tip just barely went into the plywood. The other two are buried deep, and it doesn't look like there was any interference. They all had clean holes. Everything went through its own hole. I mean, you can't ask for better than that. And that's the results I see every time. 13.2% FOC. 17% FOC. So again, there's probably something to that, you know, FOC change, but regardless, 425, 505, 545 with a load of tape that I'm sure is slowing it way down. Again, deer hide, foam, grippy foam like fat, plywood to rib, wet cardboard, jug, airspace like a lung, wet cardboard, airspace in between each thing just like a deer would have, out the back, and then a rib on the backside. Now, of course, that's assuming you hit the ribs square every time, but the point of this testing was to compare. These arrows are going to go much deeper into a deer, but regardless, this is what I see every single time I do this. So I don't know how anyone can say a lighter weight arrow. Let's go a little bit farther here. These two shafts are identical. The exact same arrow, aside from higher FOC, higher weight, lower FOC, lower weight. But it's not an extreme FOC, and it's not an extreme weight. 13% is a great FOC, really, you know, in a lot of camps. And 425 grains is probably the average arrow getting shot at whitetails. This arrow, not that heavy. 545. Now it's difficult to get a 545 arrow with 13% FOC. That's where the tape came in. So by default, this arrow is going to be not 13% FOC. In fact, I may take that tape off and shoot a clip. I'm going to leave these two in here, pull this, take the tape off, and shoot it again and see what the difference is. There you go. Okay, one last time. Same arrow that had tape on it before. I've removed the tape. Puts the FOC, I think, around 18%. Very similar to the middleweight arrow. I'm going to try one time to compare the arrow I actually shoot, or the weight in the FOC anyway, instead of having to artificially lower the FOC for equalized variables. Okay, here's the story. Now that's a result. That's the arrow that I actually shoot. It's actually a different model arrow, but the weight is the same. 545, 18% FOC. I didn't do anything different. That is by far the farthest penetration I've seen of doing all this all day long. So let's look at it. In the plywood, clean hole, all the way through the jug, all the way through the back, out the tail end. That's no other test all day has come out the back. Those holes were from me sighting in earlier, but has come out the back at all. That's a result. That's why I think you combine the weight, you combine the FOC, all the exact same diameter shaft, 245, I think inside, outsides are the same. Those two shafts are identical. This one is a different brand, but very, very similar. That's a result.